Can you believe it? The first thing I heard was that gut-wrenching crunch of rubber grinding against gravel, followed by a piercing screech and an obnoxious honk that made my heart skip a beat. I rushed to the window and there it was, a shiny Range Rover tearing down my private driveway like it was some kind of NASCAR freeway. The driver? Some cocky teenager in a varsity jacket glaring at me like I was the one trespassing on my own land. He didn't even tap the brakes, just floored it past my garage, swerving around my poor dog Max, who barked in confusion, and zoomed out through a flimsy makeshift gate I sure as hell didn't install. Can you imagine my shock? 30 seconds later, another car barreled through, then another, like my peaceful dead-end driveway on private land I'd poured my savings into, had been hijacked as the HOA's personal shortcut. That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't some random mistake. This was a full-on invasion, and those HOA vultures weren't done yet. Just 3 days earlier, everything had been so blissfully quiet. My wife and I had fallen in love with this corner plot, all because of that long, curved driveway that shielded us from the chaos of the main neighborhood road. I'm an industrial engineer, working from home, and let me tell you, peace is my oxygen. But that week, I started noticing these suspicious tire marks scarring the edges of my neatly trimmed hedges. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe the mail carrier got a bit sloppy turning around, or perhaps the neighbor's kid was practicing for their driver's test. No biggie, right? Wrong. On the third day, I spotted something that made my blood boil, a cheap paper sign nailed to a wooden stake right at the edge of my pristine lawn, screaming, "Community Flow Access, temporary routing approved by HOA, temporary approved by who? I'm no fool. I know how these HOA types operate, bickering for hours over whether mailboxes should be eggshell or ivory white, but to have the audacity to reroute traffic through my private property, that was a new low, even for them. I tried to stay calm, convincing myself it was just a misunderstanding. So I yanked that ridiculous sign off my lawn and marched down to the HOA office, which of course was tucked into a tacky converted model home. I demanded to speak to whoever was behind this madness, and that's when I met her, Karen. Oh yes, that's her real name, and trust me, she lived up to every stereotype. Karen stood there with the posture of someone who's never been wrong in her life, her voice dripping with that fake perfume commercial sweetness until you dared to challenge her. Then it was like stepping into a sarcasm hurricane. She flashed a condescending smile, treating me like a lost kid at the mall, and cooed, "Oh yes, we just needed a temporary flow solution for the construction project on Maple Drive. It's only for a few weeks, dear. Your property is just so accessible." Accessible? My land? I told her flat out she had no legal right to turn my driveway into a public throughway. Her smile only grew wider, and she tapped her iPad like it held the secrets of the universe. Actually, she purred. It's adjacent to the community boundary, which technically makes it a soft access zone if approved by the board. Soft access zone? What kind of nonsense was that? I demanded she show me this so-called clause in any law, code, or agreement. She just batted her eyelashes and said she'd be happy to show me at next month's meeting, conveniently scheduled after they planned to finish repaving Maple Drive. I trudged back home, my mind racing. Maybe I should just cool off, I thought. Maybe throw up a gate and call it a day. But the next morning I nearly dropped my coffee mug when I saw what they'd done. Those HOA goons had installed a temporary gate overnight, ripped out one of my beloved bushes, dumped a layer of cheap ugly gravel across my yard, and slapped up traffic cones with reflective tape like they owned the place. Worst of all, some genius had the nerve to plant a painted wooden sign on my property that read, "Exit only, please drive slow," on my land. I was livid. That night, I called my cousin Barry, my secret weapon. Barry's not your typical lawyer, no fancy suits or courtroom theatrics. He's the kind of guy who's barefoot at barbecues, with a law library stuffed in his garage, but when it comes to property law, he's an absolute shark. I spilled the whole story, and he was all business. "Take pictures, document everything," he said. "Don't touch that gate yet. Let them think they're winning." I asked what I should do while cars were treating my driveway like a highway. He chuckled darkly. "Let them drive. We'll make them pay for every single inch." The next day, things went from bad to apocalyptic. I was sipping coffee on my porch, trying to enjoy a rare moment of calm, when a parade, yes, a parade, of 7 SUVs roared down my driveway like it was a shortcut on Google Maps. One jerk honked at my trash bin, as if it was in their way. Another had the gall to wave at me like I was their personal doormat. But the absolute kicker, a mom in a minivan pulled up, rolled down her window, and with a straight face asked if I could move my mailbox to make it easier for her to swing wide. Move my mailbox. On my own property, I was speechless. That evening I caught my neighbor Mitch lurking near my hedges, looking like a kid who'd just broken his mom's favorite vase. Mitch is a good guy, volunteers for HOA cleanup, but sneaks off to fish during their boring meetings. He was radiating guilt, so I pressed him. "What's going on, Mitch?" I asked. He leaned in, voice low, and dropped a bombshell. "Look, man, I didn't want to say anything, but Karen's planning to make this permanent. She's pushing the HOA to petition the county to recognize your driveway as an easement, an unofficial emergency route. They're trying to absorb your driveway into the official neighborhood map." I stood there, stunned. "Permanent? My driveway?" He rubbed his neck, looking miserable. "She's already got 2 signatures. She just needs 3 more. That night, I stood by the edge of my driveway, a cold beer in one hand, Max loyally by my side, my heart pounding with fury. They were trying to steal my land, not just mess with it, but literally take it. I'd paid for this plot, sweated over every mortgage payment for this driveway, and now Karen and her minions were trying to annex it with their community road signs, forged signatures, and those infuriating traffic cones. But they'd made a fatal mistake. They thought I'd roll over and take it. Oh, how wrong they were. What they didn't know was that I used to design mechanical deterrent systems for logistics facilities. Think steel spikes, tire shredders, remote access gates, the kind of stuff that stops forklifts dead in their tracks. I grinned, took a long swig of my beer, and whispered to Max, "All right, buddy, it's time to play hardball." Because if Karen wanted to turn my driveway into a road, she was about to find out just how hostile a road could be. I was itching to unleash my counterattack, but the HOA beat me to the punch, doubling down like a desperate gambler on a losing streak. The next morning I was brushing my teeth, minding my own business, when Max started barking like a maniac, as if someone had stormed in wearing a raccoon costume. I glanced out the bathroom window and nearly choked on my mouthwash. There in my backyard were 4 guys in neon vests, community grounds crew emblazoned on their backs, sawing through my wooden fence, the one separating my property from the green belt, with power tools, not trimming, not fixing, sawing it to pieces. I threw on some sweats, sprinted outside barefoot, and let out a yell that was half war cry, half demand for answers. "What the hell are you doing?" One of them waved casually, like he was borrowing a cup of sugar. "Karen approved this," he said. "We're creating alternate access from the park trail to maintain flow." Flow? That cursed word again. What did flow even mean to these lunatics? This wasn't a Zen garden. It was my yard. I demanded to see a permit. He shrugged. "Don't need one. It's community land adjacent." Adjacent? I pointed at my fence, clearly on my deeded property. He just said, "Talk to Karen," and they packed up, leaving a 5-foot wide hole in my fence like a doggy door for SUVs. I'd had it. I called the police, reporting trespassing and property damage, my voice shaking with rage. The officer was polite but wary. When I mentioned the HOA, he let out a long sigh, like he'd heard this story a million times. He asked if I had proof of ownership. "Proof?" I snapped. "I've got the plat map, the deed and satellite images, if you want them laminated." He chuckled but said it was a civil issue, unless I could prove criminal intent. "Isn't dismantling my fence with power tools intent?" I asked. He mumbled something about it being up to interpretation, which was about as helpful as a paper towel in a hurricane. That evening, I decided to crash the HOA's emergency town hall meeting, supposedly called to discuss community access optimization. It was held in the local clubhouse, a glorified double-wide with creaky folding chairs and a sad snack table of stale cookies. I stormed in, clutching a giant poster board of my property lines and a USB stick packed with surveillance footage. Karen was perched at the head table, looking like a smug queen presiding over a banquet, her eyes glinting over her glasses as she smirked. "Oh, you're here. Wonderful. We were just talking about you," she chirped. "Has anyone ever said that in a good way?" I introduced myself, voice steady despite my fury, and laid it out. I had serious concerns about unauthorized construction and traffic being funneled through my private property. I demanded to know who authorized the destruction of my fence. Karen tapped her tablet with a manicured nail, her face twisting into a fake look of concern. "Oh, that was just a miscommunication," she said smoothly. "The crew thought it was Greenbelt territory. We'll review the boundaries later." Later, I told her I had the boundaries right there and could project the city assessor's map for everyone to see. She waved me off like I was a pesky fly. Then she pivoted, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "The real issue is that your driveway is now a critical exit point for the neighborhood. It would be irresponsible to block access during our construction phase. Safety comes first." "Safety?" I shot back. "Whose safety?" "Because the only one in danger is my dog Max, who nearly got flattened by a Jeep trying to merge into my backyard." A few neighbors snickered. Karen's smile tightened, but she didn't flinch. Oh, you won't believe the nerve of this woman. Karen made her grand move, and I swear my jaw hit the floor. With a smug click of her iPad, the screen behind her lit up with a garish PowerPoint slide titled Temporary Easement Proposal. Parcel 74B. Parcel 74B. That's my land, my driveway. There it was, spelled out in the most obnoxious Comic Sans font, a list of bullet points detailing her audacious plan to temporarily turn my private driveway into an emergency access lane under the HOA's iron grip. Can you even imagine the gall? I shot my hand up, desperate to protest, but Karen just ignored me, her eyes glinting with that infuriating self-righteousness. I wasn't about to let her steamroll me, so I shouted over her, my voice echoing in the clubhouse. Parcel 74B is privately owned. You can't just designate it without county approval, legal consent, and maybe a blood sacrifice to whatever HOA gods you worship. The room went silent for a split second, but Karen just sighed, her lips curling into a patronizing smirk. We'll let the board vote on the proposal, she said, like it was a done deal. I glared at the board members, 5 strangers who either didn't know my name or had once slapped me with a fine for putting my recycling out a day early. One of them, a guy with a permanent scowl, was already nodding like a bobblehead on a dashboard. The vote came down 3-2 in her favor, and Karen's grin was so wide it could have swallowed the moon. Proposal passed, she chirped. It's non-binding for now, but it gives us operational flexibility. Operational flexibility. I was so furious I could have chucked a chair across the room. As I stormed out of that suffocating meeting, my phone buzzed. It was Barry, my cousin and legal aide, who'd been watching the whole fiasco on the Clubhouse livestream. Of course, Karen had insisted on recording it for transparency, probably to bask in her own glory. Barry was practically She just shot herself in the foot, man, he said, his voice crackling with excitement. How? I demanded, still fuming. He explained, she put a legal proposal based on outright lies into the official record. That makes her liable for any fallout. If you can catch her admitting she knew it was false, we've got her pinned. My heart raced. Could this be the key to shutting her down? When I got home, I found a letter taped to my garage door, and guess who it was from? Karen, naturally. It read, Dear homeowner, we are excited to announce the pilot phase of community flow routing is underway. Please remove any personal obstructions from the driveway to allow smooth passage. Thank you for being part of a better tomorrow. A better tomorrow. There was even a smiley face sticker in the corner, mocking me. I crumpled it in my fist, my blood boiling. I sank onto my porch with Max, my loyal dog, by my side, watching yet another car roar through my driveway, nearly sideswiping my garden hose. How had it come to this? In less than a week, my serene private driveway, the one I'd paid a fortune for, had been transformed into a public highway. All because Karen waved her digital wand and called it progress. The worst part? She thought I was still on the defensive, scrambling to keep up. Oh, how wrong she was. What she didn't know was that I was already fighting back, and I was playing for keeps. I'd sent a cease and desist letter through Barry, filed a preliminary injunction with the city, and requested a zoning clarification from the county. I'd also set up hidden trail cams at 3 access points, silently recording every license plate and timestamp of every car that dared trespass on my land. But the real masterpiece, oh, it was coming, and it was going to be glorious. Back in my logistics days, I designed deterrent systems for theft-prone loading zones. Think heavy-duty stuff like steel spikes, tire shredders, and remote access gates. One of our wilder projects was a motorized spike strip system, with steel spikes that could pop up or retract at the push of a button or even a voice command. It was illegal for public roads, sure, but on private property, perfectly fair game. I'd already ordered the materials, industrial-grade gravel, custom retractable spikes, and a slick little solar panel to keep it all powered. My plan? To turn my driveway into the most miserable detour in HOA history. Let them come, let them flow. They had no idea what was waiting. There's something downright cathartic about plotting revenge when it's 100% legal and oh so deserved. It's like a symphony of power tools, steel and petty precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker cry tears of joy. That night, I stayed up late, hunched over my workbench like a mad scientist in a Hollywood thriller, sketching blueprints for what I proudly dubbed Operation Gravel Gladiator. The plan was simple but brilliant. I'd transform my smooth HOA-invaded driveway into a mechanical gauntlet, designed to make every car regret crossing my property line. First up, I ordered a massive load of industrial-grade gravel, not those cute little landscaping pebbles you'd see at a garden center. No way. This was jagged road roughening, undercarriage scratching gravel, the kind used on rugged off-grid logging trails. I told the supplier to dump it right in the middle of my driveway, no questions asked. When the truck rolled up, the driver squinted at me, confused. You sure you want this here, buddy? Looks like you still use this driveway. I just grinned. a spark of mischief in my eyes. Not anymore, I said, and he shrugged, dumping the load with a thunderous crash. Next came the real fun, the spike strip system. Years ago I'd worked on a prototype for a retractable deterrent mechanism for restricted freight zones. It never hit the market. Legal teams and insurance folks lack vision, but I'd kept the blueprints, and they were about to get their moment. With a few tweaks and some late-night garage tinkering, I built a motorized spike system that could be raised or lowered with a Bluetooth remote or even a simple garage door button, powered by a battery and solar panel combo. It was a thing of beauty. I buried it under a removable metal plate, camouflaged with gravel, right in the path where those HOA drones were cutting through. I tested it with my own car first, raised the spikes, crept forward, then lowered them just in time to glide by safely. Then I tried it with the spikes up. My tires hissed and deflated in 2 seconds flat. Effective? Oh, you bet. Deadly? Absolutely. Perfect? Beyond my wildest dreams. By noon the next day, my trap was set. The new gravel had turned my once smooth concrete driveway into a rattling, bone-shaking nightmare. The hidden spike strip, primed and ready, was concealed under just enough dirt and rock to blend in seamlessly. And the cherry on top? I planted a shiny new sign at the driveway's entrance. Nothing too in your face. Just a calm, polite warning. Private property. No through traffic. Proceed at your own risk. But apparently, the HOA had brainwashed their followers to ignore any sign that didn't scream community, because within 20 minutes of my setup, the first victim rolled in. A white Mercedes SUV driven by none other than Karen herself. I stood in the shadows by my porch, sipping iced tea, my heart pounding with the thrill of victory. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Karen turned into my driveway without a hint of hesitation, 3 other cars trailing her like lemmings, ready to follow her through their precious shortcut. She didn't even notice the new gravel, or if she did, she probably thought it was some tacky design choice she could find me for later. Her SUV glided confidently toward the middle of the driveway, right over the spike plate. I pressed the button in my pocket, and oh, it was like a scene from an action blockbuster. The spikes shot up with a hiss of air and metal, piercing her front tires with a sickening crunch and a comical pef. Her Mercedes lurched forward like a wounded beast, its rims grinding into the jagged gravel before screeching to a humiliating halt. Karen flung open her door, stepping out in her high heels, wobbling like a newborn deer. I watched, barely containing my glee, as she stared at her flattened tires, her perfectly manicured world crumbling before her eyes. Behind her the other cars started honking, one peeling out in panic, another driver hopping out to ask if she needed help. She waved him off, her face red with fury, and then she spotted me, standing there with Max, cool as a cucumber. You sabotaged the road, she shrieked, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. I just smiled, calm and collected. Driveway. Private, not a road. She jabbed a trembling finger at the ground. There are spikes in there. Sure are, I replied, my voice dripping with satisfaction. Just a little deterrent for uninvited guests. You'll be hearing from the HOA, she spat, and you'll be hearing from my lawyer again. I shot back, relishing every second. The next morning, a certified letter from the HOA arrived, demanding I remove my dangerous installations, and accusing me of endangering the community. Endangering them. I fired back with a letter on Barry's official letterhead, laying out their repeated trespasses, property destruction, and undeniable proof that every driver was warned by my sign. We even included a crystal clear still from my security cam, catching Karen red-handed, ignoring the sign and speeding onto my lane. But the battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. That afternoon, the HOA called another emergency board meeting, and you better believe Barry and I showed up, ready to throw down. Barry wore his loudest Hawaiian shirt just to get under their skin, and it worked. Karen was there, bandaged up and seething, clutching photos of her ruined tires like they were evidence from a crime scene. She declared me a danger to the community, and demanded I be fined the maximum penalty for sabotaging shared access infrastructure. Shared. I nearly laughed out loud. Barry stood up, cool as ice, and passed out copies of my property deed to every board member. He pointed to the official parcel boundary. What shared infrastructure? He said, his voice cutting through the room. This man owns every inch of that driveway. It's not part of any community plan, and it was never approved for communal use. Your vote to use it was based on fraudulent claims. Karen stammered. It was a misunderstanding, but Barry wasn't having it. No, he snapped, stepping forward. It was trespassing. It was willful negligence. It was a campaign of harassment. In this document, he held up a time-stamped screenshot of Karen's HOA memo, bragging about rerouting traffic, regardless of homeowner resistance. Proves it. The room went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Karen's empire was crumbling, and I was loving every second of it. The room fell into a stunned silence, so thick you could have sliced it with a knife. One board member, Alan, who always looked like he'd rather be anywhere but an HOA meeting, muttered under his breath, "Wait, are we liable for this?" His voice trembled with the dawning horror of what they'd gotten themselves into. Barry, my cousin and legal ninja, flashed a grin that could have lit up the night sky. "Oh, you bet."
he said, his tone dripping with confidence. The meeting collapsed into chaos with no resolution, and Karen, oh, she stormed out, her heels clicking like rapid-fire gunshots, her face a mask of fury. The rest of the board scrambled, suddenly inventing excuses to reevaluate their precious easement discussion. That night, the shortcut traffic vanished like rats fleeing a sinking ship. My driveway, my sacred hard-earned driveway, was finally quiet again. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to slink away defeated. She'd be back, and I braced myself for her next move. As I sat on my porch with Max, my loyal dog, watching the wind rustle the trees, and the last golden rays of sunlight dance across the sharp gravel like tiny diamonds, I couldn't help but let out a hearty laugh. The HOA thought they could bully me into submission. They thought they could outvote me, outsmart me, and grind me down. Ha! They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just some stubborn homeowner whining about his lawn. I was an engineer with blueprints, a lawyer cousin with a knack for property law, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The audacity of their arrogance fueled my fire, and I was ready for whatever they threw next. By the end of the week, the HOA had gone eerily quiet. No snarky letters, no passive-aggressive emails, not even their usual drones on segways creeping by to snap photos of my non-compliant gravel masterpiece. It was too quiet, like the calm before a hurricane. I knew Karen better than that. Her silence didn't mean surrender. It meant she was scheming, plotting her next power grab. That woman would start a war over a crooked lawn gnome, so there was no way she'd let the spike strip incident slide. And sure enough, 2 days later, my suspicions were confirmed, when a county inspector rolled up unannounced in a city-issued sedan. He stepped out, clipboard in hand, reflective sunglasses glinting like he was ready to rain citations from the heavens. I was in the garage, tinkering with a wireless backup for my spike system, when he called out, "You the property owner?" I stood up, wiped the grease off my hand, and shot back with a grin. "Depends on who's asking. If it's the IRS, I'm just the guy watering the grass." He cracked a smile, clearly amused. "Nah, I'm county. Got a report about unauthorized land modifications, obstructing emergency access, and get this, installing military-grade vehicle deterrence on a public easement." Military grade. I had to stifle a laugh. He seemed more intrigued than concerned. I waved him over to follow me around the side yard, past Max, who gave a half-hearted woof, clearly unimpressed by the visitor. We reached the driveway, and he eyed the gravel, then crouched to inspect the spike plate like it was a piece of fine art. "You build this?" he asked, his tone almost admiring. "Every inch," I said proudly. He let out a low whistle. "Looks like something I saw at a shipping yard in Oakland." "Not bad." He brushed gravel off his knee and stood up. "Mind if I see your paperwork?" I led him inside, my heart pounding with anticipation, and handed over a folder stuffed with my property deed, surveyor maps, Barry's cease and desist letters, and the HOA's own damning proposal from the town hall. He flipped through it slowly, nodding like a judge weighing evidence. When he reached the screenshot of Karen's memo, where she arrogantly called my driveway a provisional secondary exit, he let out a chuckle that warmed my soul. "Yeah, that's gonna be a big problem for them," he said, shaking his head. I couldn't resist asking, "Am I in trouble?" He waved it off like it was nothing. "Not even a little. The land's yours. The driveway's yours. They've got no authority to modify, designate, or use it without your consent. And that spike strip, sure, it's aggressive, but totally legal on private property. You even posted signage. Most folks wouldn't bother." Then with a sly grin, he leaned in and added, "Just between us, I've dealt with your HOA before. Karen and I go way back." My ears perked up. There was a story here. "What happened?" I asked, practically begging for the tea. He leaned against my kitchen counter, settling in like he was about to spin a campfire tale. "A few years back, she tried to rezone a neighbor's lot for some ridiculous community meditation gazebo. Problem was, she didn't bother getting the neighbor's permission. Same old trick, claimed it was adjacent land, pushed it through the board, and filed a temporary designation with our office without a shred of proper documentation. We caught it, shut it down, and slapped the HOA with a fine for false filings. She's been on my radar ever since." I was floored. Karen was a serial schemer. I almost offered the guy a cold beer for his service. Before he left, he promised to file a report, confirming the HOA had violated multiple zoning ordinances and overstepped their legal bounds. He even hinted that the county might dig into their past petitions if more complaints piled up. As he climbed into his car, he tossed out one last gem. "Keep the spike strip. Just maybe don't electrify it." I grinned, my mischief meter spiking. No promises. I called back, already imagining the possibilities. That visit was pure gold, but the real cherry on top came later that evening. I was reviewing security footage from my driveway cam when I spotted something downright sinister. 2 nights earlier, just past midnight, a group of HOA workers had slunk onto my property, dressed in dark clothing, no vests, no logos, like they were pulling off a heist. They crept along my hedges, snipped the caution tape I'd put up after Karen's tire fiasco with bolt cutters, and started tampering with the gate lock at the rear access point. One of them even had the nerve to snap photos of my garage keypad. I zoomed in on his face, and my heart heart skipped a beat. It was Todd, Karen's Weasley nephew, the HOA's so-called technical coordinator. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This was straight up illegal. My hands shook with excitement as I forwarded the footage to Barry, who lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "We've got them," he crowed. "That's trespassing, attempted unlawful entry, and probable intent to commit theft or vandalism. And since they were acting for the HOA, Karen's on the hook." He urged me to play it smart. No confronting Karen just yet. Instead, we dropped this bombshell at the next open HOA board meeting, right in front of the whole neighborhood, and let the community see the rot for themselves. But I wasn't done yet. I had one final ace up my sleeve.
Months ago, when I first bought this house, I'd noticed a neglected little triangle of land behind my fence. It was technically outside my parcel, just a sad patch of overgrown weeds and trash, but I dug into the public land records and found out it had reverted to the county after the original developer bailed. It was up for auction, dirt cheap, so I snapped it up quietly, legally, and all mine. Karen had no clue. She'd been banking on that triangle as part of her flow corridor, claiming it was communal greenbelt without ever filing the paperwork to annex it. Now with the deed finalized, I owned the very ground her whole shortcut scheme depended on. I printed that deed, framed it like a trophy, and couldn't stop grinning. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, the air was electric. The spike strip incident had become the stuff of neighborhood legend, whispered about at every mailbox and dog walk. Karen was trying to keep control, her voice overly calm, but sweat glistened on her temples. She was nervous, and I loved it. Barry and I strolled in late, deliberately, just to rattle her. When she asked if we had anything to add to community infrastructure improvements, Barry stood up, plugged his laptop into the projector, and played the night vision footage of Todd and his midnight crew. The room erupted in gasps, followed by murmurs of "Is that Todd? And are we paying for this?" Then I stepped forward, my heart pounding with triumph, and handed Karen an envelope. She ripped it open, expecting another complaint, but her face froze when she saw the deed to the triangle lot. I raised my voice, loud enough for every neighbor to hear, just so we're crystal clear. This land isn't HOA adjacent anymore. It's mine. I own the triangle, and your shortcut is officially dead. Karen stared at the deed like it had personally slapped her. One board member leapt to his feet and declared, "I move for a review of Karen's actions, land use, legal filings, unauthorized spending, all of it." Another chimed in, seconded. The vote was unanimous, a tidal wave of rebellion. As I walked out, Max waiting in the truck, a wave of peace washed over me, the kind only mechanical revenge, county validation, and a surprise land grab could bring. Karen wasn't done fighting, but her influence was bleeding out. Her plan was in ruins. The shortcut was history, and my spikes, oh, they were staying right where they were. 2 weeks later, the neighborhood felt like a different world, not quieter, because Karen was incapable of silence, but unsteady, like the ground had shifted. The spike strip saga had gone from hushed gossip to full-blown legend. I overheard some teens biking by, giggling about my driveway as the death strip. Someone even slipped a drawing into my mailbox, a cartoon tire sobbing. As it rolled over spikes, Barry framed it and hung it in his office, cackling every time he saw it. But beneath the laughs, you could feel the change. Karen's spell over the HOA was breaking. For the first time, the board seemed less like her personal army and more like a group of nervous folks desperate to dodge a lawsuit. And me, I was savoring every moment of this hard-won victory, ready for whatever Karen cooked up next. Oh, I wasn't about to let my guard down, not with Karen still out there. She wasn't the type to slink away into obscurity. No way. That woman was a storm in stilettos, and I could feel her brewing her most outrageous stunt yet. Sure enough, it hit like a sneak attack, tucked into the HOA's monthly newsletter, a so-called emergency safety ordinance proposal, cloaked in that slippery sanitized language that screamed legal loopholes. Can you believe the nerve? This ordinance would let the HOA seize temporary access rights to my property during emergencies, like natural disasters, construction, or get this, any vague events deemed disruptive to community flow. Community flow? What kind of nonsense was that? It was Karen's desperate backdoor scheme to claw back control of my driveway whenever she could twist inconvenience into an emergency. The kicker? She had the audacity to include a neighborhood map in the newsletter, with my driveway highlighted in bright screaming yellow as a designated emergency exit. Again, the sheer arrogance took my breath away, but oh, it was the golden ticket I needed to bury her. I grabbed that newsletter, my hands shaking with a mix of fury and excitement, and highlighted every offending line in neon orange. Barry, my lawyer cousin and partner in crime, was right there with me as we stormed into the county office like avenging warriors. We met with John, the same inspector who'd visited before, and let me tell you, that man's face lit up like I'd brought a bucket of popcorn to a drama fest. When we slapped the newsletter and its shady map on his desk, he leaned back in his chair and let out a belly laugh that echoed off the walls. Is she fearless or just plain reckless? He roared. This is a zoning violation begging to happen. Barry laid it out like a prosecutor in a courtroom, his voice sharp and steady. Karen was pushing an ordinance that created implied easements over my private land without a shred of legal authority, consent, or compensation. Even worse, she was peddling this garbage as official HOA business, implying county backing when there was none. John nodded, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Oh, this is big, he said. It's time for a sit-down with the whole board. And that's how we ended up at the wildest, most chaotic HOA meeting in neighborhood history. The clubhouse was bursting at the seams, with so many residents packed in that they had to drag in rickety folding chairs from the pool area. People were shoulder to shoulder, buzzing with curiosity like bees in a hive. Karen strutted in, dressed like she was about to deliver a TED Talk, her blazer sporting shoulder pads sharp enough to cut glass and that ridiculous Bluetooth earpiece dangling uselessly. She always forgot it wasn't plugged in. She flashed a fake smile, waved like a pageant queen, and took the podium as if she were commanding an army. Her opening speech was a syrupy sermon about safety, unity, and the responsibility we all share to plan ahead. Gag me. Then, with a dramatic flourish, she unveiled a massive banner titled Pathways to Community Harmony, featuring a giant aerial view of the neighborhood. My driveway slapped front and center in a glaring green. My driveway? Again? That's when John stood up from the back, raising his hand like a sheriff about to draw. I've got a few questions, he declared, and the room went dead quiet. Karen blinked, her smile twitching, not quite reaching her eyes. Of course, please, she chirped, but you could see the panic creeping in. John strolled to the front, facing the crowd like a hero in a showdown. I'm a county inspector, he began, his voice calm but deadly, and this it's an illegal modification of public records, implying county endorsement it doesn't have. This emergency ordinances you're peddling violates zoning laws, property rights, and multiple sections of the Civil Code. Karen opened her mouth to interrupt, but John steamrolled on. Oh, and we've reviewed footage from a resident showing unauthorized HOA personnel sneaking onto private property at night. That's been handed to law enforcement, and because of this pattern of behavior, we're launching a formal audit of this HOA's governance. An audit? The crowd gasped, and I could have sworn I heard angels singing. The silence was deafening. Karen stood there, looking like she'd swallowed a whole lemon, her face twisting in shock. One board member shoved back from the table and stood, his voice shaking. I vote for a motion of no confidence in President Karen's leadership. Another leapt up, seconded. A third called out, all in favor. Hands shot up across the room, a forest of rebellion. Karen froze, her mouth flapping like a fish, trying to explain a Ponzi scheme. Then, as if the universe itself wanted to seal her fate, the door swung open, and a tow truck driver poked his head in, clipboard in hand. Yo, is Karen here? Got an order to repossess an HOA vehicle. Something about misuse of community funds. Misuse of funds. The room exploded in laughter and applause, as Karen turned the color of a boiled lobster and bolted out, her heels clattering like a runaway train. The fallout was swift and glorious. By the next morning, Karen had resigned via a passive-aggressive email, dripping with veiled threats and a bizarre plug for her upcoming memoir. A memoir. Good luck with that. The HOA board launched a full review of every policy she'd rammed through in the past year, quietly scrapping several of her pet projects. As for me, I got a formal apology from the board, complete with a statement affirming my absolute right to block any access to my property. Barry, ever the showman, had it notarized and framed, and it's now hanging proudly in my living room. A few days later, I decided to celebrate nothing too fancy, just a neighborhood barbecue, at the end of my gravel driveway, with a custom banner proclaiming, "Shortcut closed, party open." I fired up the grill, flipped burgers, and blasted classic rock, the air filled with the smell of charcoal and victory. I unveiled a special surprise, a shiny plaque mounted at the driveway's entrance that read private property. Violators will be spiked, shamed and possibly fed to max. The neighbors loved it. Some were hesitant at first, still reeling from Karen's reign, but once they realized she was truly dethroned, they let loose. Mitch rolled up with a cooler full of beer. The couple down the street brought their corgi decked out in a tiny tuxedo, and even John, the county inspector, swung by for a hot dog, eyeing my spike system, now raised in trophy mode, with a grin. Nice work, he said, and I beamed. That night, as the sun sank behind the trees and the last guests waved goodbye, I sank onto my porch with Max at my side. The stars twinkled above, the air was crisp, and my gravel driveway gleamed in the moonlight like a silent, steadfast guardian. The shortcut was gone, the chaos was over, and Karen, she was nothing but a fading footnote in a story too wild to be fiction. Max looked up at me, then out at the driveway, and let out a long, contented sigh that said it all. I nodded, my heart full. Yeah, buddy, we earned this, I said, and for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace.